Nonprofit and philanthropic leaders devote their lives to the service of others, but sometimes they need a little help. Kristine Michie has been deep in the work and the play of helping changemakers grow their impact for decades. So whether you're ladling soup at a local shelter or attending a UN peace conference, you need to find the balance between the heavy work and a light touch so you don't burn out. And Kristine believes play is at the center of that. Welcome to the Playful Podcast, bringing fun to the serious work of changing the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Playful Podcast. Another episode in our Brave Voices series. I was just telling somebody recently, I'm like a glutton for this series. I can't get enough Brave Voices, and there's so many of them right now and so needed. So Jess Tomlin, thank you for being here and being brave with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you. All right. So I'm going to do something, folks. I don't always read the bios, but I couldn't do it justice if I paraphrase. So I'm going to read your bio, and then that's going to be a teaser, because then we're going to talk about play for a few minutes, and then we're going to come back to all this great stuff. Okay. So Jess is a social entrepreneur who has unleashed more than $1 billion with a B in new funding for human rights movements across the course of her career, working with politicians, leading philanthropists, business leaders, and activists across the globe. As currently CEO of the Equality Fund, which is on the NASDAQ, she has led the global fund in moving $100 million to 1,000 human rights organizations in 100 countries. It's also invested $300 million of investment capital in high impact businesses around the world that are women-led and built, yes, all while maintaining a 100% gender-aligned investment portfolio. Jess has worked across sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. She previously led a large UN program in the Middle East focused on driving educational opportunities for more than 500,000 Palestinian refugees across Jordan, the West Bank, Gaza, Lebanon, Syria. And that's just we're just getting started. So first of all, thank you for all that service over all these years in all those places on behalf of humankind.
Oh, well, that was a mouthful to read. My condolences.
Oh, no. It's so good. All right. So now I want to ask you. So folks, that's what we're going to be talking about. But I don't want to skip over asking you, who was Jess as a little girl?
Oh, great question. Jess as a little girl was moody, the youngest of 3 redheaded sisters and 2 redheaded parents. So that just sets the tone for the environment that I grew up in. Very scrappy, very opinionated, very loud. And ironically, even though I live a very externally facing, extroverted life by virtue of being the CEO of the Equality Fund, I'm by far the most introverted person in my family. It's funny, you play different roles in different aspects of your life. Yeah. I would say deeply opinionated, righteous, deeply committed from a very young age to a sense of equality and inequality, and really trying to understand that. My legs were too big for my body, and I was very gangly, and I've been probably wearing this top knot, which those who are listening won't see, but I've been probably wearing it since the day I was born.
Wow, I love it. Let's grab our ice cream, because I usually, when we eat our ice cream, I talk about what's the scoop on how you came to care. And that would fit into this idea of who you were as a little girl. So tell me what flavor you chose, and then I'll do a quick little shout out for Taharka Brothers as we get into the next part.
Well, first of all, you sent me 6 flavors, which delighted my children to no end, not to mention me. I am currently having the mint chocolate chip, which is absolutely sublime.
So good. Okay. So, and I appreciate, it's actually, the generosity is from Taharka Brothers, our ice cream sponsor. They send the 6 pints to all our guests. They're a social enterprise, employee-owned ice cream company in Baltimore. And I called them out of the blue 2 years ago and told them what I was up to. And they said, we want to be part of it. And there you go. And yeah, and I said, we don't necessarily need to send 6 every time. And listen how cute this is. She told me they keep each other cold. It's kind of part of what keeps them frozen. Is they're like, can you picture them in there? Just like a little warren of ice cream. It's delightful.
If you want to move better, you move together.
Exactly. And the flavor I chose is Keep Your Head Up, and it is a call out, of course, to Tupac. And the flavor is blackberry crumble layered with vanilla ice cream.
Oh,
Okay,
come on.
right? Oh my god!
That was
And the way
not in
that
my 6-course
ooh,
selection.
okay, so now you know, folks. And Taharka Brothers does ship nationwide, and it does come in a hot pink box with dry ice, and is a complete delight. Okay, so that little girl,
Mhm.
do you remember an early story, or do you have a memory of this idea the world was bigger than just you and your redheaded family, and you had a role to play, and if there was injustice, maybe you could do something about it?
It's funny. I have been asked this question, and I don't think I have a real sense of a specific moment. What I would say is that I grew up in a family, a working class family, and my mother was the kind of person who did everything, right? I have distinct memories of my mom re-roofing my roof and paving my driveway, coming home from school, and there she was paving the driveway. So I had this sense from a very early age that there were sort of no limits, and that there was something about just being deeply capable and self-sufficient. So I really credit her for that. I would say, somebody once said this to me, that it just takes one person to tell you that you're capable in order for you to really believe it in the right moment, and for it to to strike right, because the truth may have a ring to it. And I remember receiving an award on my grade 8 graduation, and it was like for the Zonta Club of Canada or something very, I still don't quite know what this award was. But the woman giving away that award looked at me and she said, I think you're going to have a big future. And I think that you're going to work in support of women and girls. And I just remember that conversation to this day, because I remember like looking behind my shoulder to see if there was anybody else there. And anyway, sometimes the truth has a ring to it. And in that moment, I just needed to hear that. And I'm like, why not me? Why not me? So that's kind of where that started. But I would say most folks who've known me from a young age would probably say all sorts of things, but I don't know that anyone would deny that I had fire in my belly.
Yeah. And you mentioned Canada there, and you are Canadian, and
Yes.
and Equality Fund is Canadian HQ, right? That's your kind of home base address. Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
we're totally a global organization. As
Yes.
you mentioned in the
Yep.
intro, we
Yep.
support human rights organizations in over 100 countries around the world, but it is a sort of a Canadian seeded initiative that has a global impact and works with all sorts of countries from around the world.
So, how is it to be Canadian and running a Canadian organization in this moment, adjacent to us, here? And I know, right now you're living in the US, right?
I am.
So you're quite, I mean, everyone is around the world familiar with what's going on here. How's it advantageous and or in any way different and challenging?
Huh. The diplomatic answer escapes me. I would say a couple things. I'm currently in San Francisco, which I think is its own little bubble in all sorts of ways. And I'm learning that now. I'm a very proud Canadian. And this, in particular, the relationship between Canada and the US right now, and the way the US and Canada are feeling about each other, it hurts me. It actually pains me, because of the longstanding friendship and relationship and trade partnership and all of the things that have existed for so long. And I'm quite close to that, and so I'm upset by it, and I think we will stand the test of time as two countries who have been incredible allies for hundreds of years. I would say that I think we're in a moment in time where moral leadership is lacking a little. Maybe to say that politely. I think we are in a moment where each country is trying to figure out what it stands for. And my country is right now really going through a lot of change, right? It's in this existential threat of losing its greatest partner and ally, or having that relationship fundamentally shift. And in a way, that's inviting Canadians, I think, to think differently about how they feel about their country, what they stand for, and what kind of moral leadership they wish to stand for as a nation, which I think is a conversation that is a long time coming. And I actually really welcome it. because Canada has played a historical role, whether from, back in the day in apartheid and leading the case for peacekeepers around the world. We have a very unique role to play that's very different from the US. And so I think there are really hard conversations happening on both sides of the border right now.
Mm-hmm. And I'm wanting to, like, I feel like Horton Hears a Who, right? Remember that little we are here. Like, I want, like, we're all saying, like, it's there's more of us that want this to be good and as it was and better than ever than there are those others.
Yes.
And so giving voice to that. And I know that's the people-led movement, the people-led movements that you're a part of. Yes. So, I mean, I don't know what the numbers are, but, I feel like it's definitely a minority of those that are trying to take us in this other direction. Right. Tell me about Equality Fund and all this work you've devoted your life to, how you find and lift up the people who can be the counter winds to that.
That's a beautiful question. I have come from a long career of working in large institutions, in UN, large international organizations, World Bank and others. And about 12 to 13 years ago, I came to the realization that the thing that I could do that would bring probably the most value to the work I believe needs to be done in my lifetime is to really direct my energy in getting as much investment and as much visibility as possible onto the leaders, human rights leaders, movement leaders who are driving change in their communities, who are most proximate to their communities, who understand the issues, who have built trust, and who are there for the long term. And having worked, I think, across the entire sphere of development, international development as it's coined, and philanthropy, I fundamentally believe that is our innovation blind spot. I believe that if we are deeply investing in proximate leaders to drive change over lifetimes, which unfortunately is what it may take, then we have no idea what potential that will truly unlock. And we haven't done that well as a global community. I mean, these are the organizations and leaders who are oftentimes unfunded. They're oftentimes volunteer organized. They're oftentimes deeply limited by financial resources and capacity and visibility. And so they just don't get the seat at the table that they so rightfully deserve. And so that is what is at the crux of my desire to do this work. And it has been the best decision I've ever made, personally and professionally.
Jess, can you dimension for us as a math problem? So let me know if, I have a feeling this could be off the top of your head and tip of your tongue, but like money wise, kind of our idea that, okay, so nonprofit philanthropic dollars are a pot. We know government dollars are broadly bigger than that.
Yes.
And then, but my sense is investment capital is the biggest pot of all. And if we've segregated that and said, well, we're not doing any of that for social good. We're going to try and do social good over here with some government money. And then all the rest of it based only on a business model that's counting on the largesse of others, right?
Totally.
Right. So how am I doing on that kind of sense of exponential amounts, and how can we, and how are you moving that investment capital and not saying that's just for business so to speak?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's a great question, and it's kind of at the crux of what the Equality Fund is trying to do. So I think it's like 70 trillion are being moved in capital markets and 70 billion are being moved through philanthropy. So it's absolutely incomparable in terms of the size and the scale and the potential for impact. And it's largely untapped, I would say, what's being done on the investment side. The reason we built Equality Fund was because we wanted to stop this cycle of trying to solve problems with philanthropic dollars, when those philanthropic dollars were largely being earned in capital markets, where the harm was oftentimes being done to the communities that we're trying to serve through our philanthropic dollars. So we were fixing a flood with a Band-Aid. And so we wanted to influence the entire sphere. And so we've got sort of whatever it is, 70 trillion and 70 billion. And then we've got the average annual budget of an organization who's on the ground driving that change, deeply committed to the long-term work of changing minds, attitudes, beliefs, behaviors, systems, values, you name it. And their average annual budget, if they're led by a woman, is less than $20,000 a year. So something's got to give.
Yeah. We could fund all of them.
Yes, we could.
That's what it
Yes,
feels
we
like.
will.
Yes, we will. Thank you. Yes, we are. How are we doing? And, I feel like we're in this kind of, conversational, hurdle at the moment, or not us, but like the world.
Yes.
How are we doing with the understanding that gender lens investing or other screens are not, they're not going to take you out of the game. They're not going to reduce. In fact, just the opposite, right?
Yes.
Those women-led and diverse-led businesses. The work that Nancy Levine Stearns has been doing, posting about the DEI, the companies that have doubled down on their DEI and the capital they're moving and the business they're doing. But how are we doing on this general out there in the world belief that it's not, you're not going to get reduced returns if you insist on some of these screens?
Well, this is the bet. This is the fundamental assumption that's underpinning our wealth building strategy. What we're trying to do is build independent, autonomous wealth for movements, right? Like, as opposed to being completely dependent on government funding or philanthropic dollars. These movements are long-term and systems changing, and they need long-term investment. And so that was what we were really trying to do. And in building what is, I believe now, one of the largest gender lens impact investment portfolios. So your listeners have a sense, we moved $300 million into a 100% gender lens impact investment portfolio across public, debt, private markets. And in cases where there were products that we needed, we built them if they didn't exist, or we have aligned with others or whatever. And it has been an incredibly interesting experience for folks who are not investors necessarily to have moved into this space. And when you have $300 million to invest, you get a different seat at that table, which is the kind of influence we were actually after. What I would say is we're 5 years into this, and and we were launched during COVID, right? And so the markets were really, really uncertain. And our outsourced chief investment officers would always say to me, like, our investments suck a lot less than everybody else's. But and that's true, actually. There's been just a steady growth, and we are by far outperforming those in traditional markets at this point. We're actually doing better than traditional sort of investment strategies are doing, in large part because of the very rigorous screen that we are putting on all of our investment decisions. There are 18 or 19 decision-making screens that we look at, and it's beyond, are there women on the board? Because that actually is not a great indicator of success. But we're looking at things like, are the men taking parental leave? Right? Are there leadership strategies for women of color inside these companies? What does the C-suite really look like? What are the leadership development strategies for women as they enter the company? What are the parental leave strategies? Do they have a menopause policy? Looking at like these kinds of things, because the fact is when those things exist, then those companies actually do perform better and they are more profitable.
And those companies are actually serving, employing, and marketing to the actual world we're living in.
Exactly.
Right. And more and more so all the time.
And maybe I would just offer on to that. I mean, I think on the private market side of things, that's where you have a ton of creative license to be able to fund bold, innovative solutions that the world really requires right now. Like in our grant making work, the Equality Fund supports, as you mentioned, over 1,000 organizations in 100 countries in the world. And these are drivers and leaders in the field of human rights, everything from violence against women to trying to change laws and policies across the world. And what we can do with the investment side of things is that we can support the whole continuum of change. So, for example, we may be supporting organizations in Gaza or in the Middle East or in Haiti who are managing significant conflict, destitution, poverty, crisis, humanitarian crisis, and suffering. And with our investment portfolio, as one example, we are also investing in a health tech company who have built inflatable incubators that are serving those in Gaza and Haiti. So it's about using the full continuum of capital at our disposal to drive change.
You talked about moral leadership, and I've been talking to a lot of guests about moral imagination as well. And it feels like that's like, an
Totally.
inflatable incubator, right? I mean, things that so many, the fact that we're on Zoom, there's so many things that didn't exist before that
Yes.
somebody imagined, and then it
That's it.
started, and now it's a thing, right? So, and Rua Benjamin says a great thing about making sure we don't abdicate all the imagining to those with the resources. Because
Totally.
right now, those in these positions of power who are imagining this AI future or present, et cetera,
Yes.
no one's or imagine when they sat in some room and said, let's get rid of the Department of Education. Like somebody imagined that, which would seem unimaginable. And then
Yep.
so I want to like really boost up and amplify the imaginative spirit of the change makers, leaders,
Yep.
innovators, business people who can, let's imagine it. And then, like you talk about fueling, the fuel is money, and then fueling that imaginative spirit and the execution of the dreams, and how many misses for how many successes. That's business. That's imagining.
Absolutely. I mean, let's get that t-shirt and wear it every day. I actually, the world order as we know it is crumbling.
Yeah.
There is a new system being created right now. And the injection of imagination and creativity and ingenuity and all of those things is what's required in order for us to build differently and better. And I really believe that. I believe that crisis is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
I really do. And I'm witnessing just the tenacity and the ingenuity that is especially in the minds and hearts of these organizational leaders who are really close to the crisis in so many different ways. And the innovation and the ingenuity and the spirit is just incredible. Yes. And there's no shortage of possibilities with how we respond and how we build differently. And actually, I would say I really, on the point of imagination is liberty because it is energizing. Imagining, having the ability to be in a space of imagination is freeing and it is joyful. Yeah. And in this moment in time when there's not feeling like a lot of freedom or a lot of joy, what a gift that is to be able to give ourselves permission to imagine.
Right. And imagine and play just are linked. Playfulness creates the context and spirit for the imagination to be welcome. It's not rigid. I think in the guest brief, I see there's that Carl Jung quote, the creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct. Mm-hmm. And then Robin D.G. Kelly, the map to a new world is in the imagination. So tell me about how you infuse imagination and playfulness into your leadership as a boss colleague in your spaces. And then also, I bet you've got some great stories about when you come upon play and imagination out there in the world, meeting movement builders.
Absolutely. I mean, I do actually think it's deeply entrenched in the DNA of the Equality Fund, right? We kind of were created from a scrappy little organization that had 6 staff members and a budget that had to be kind of split over 2 fiscal years in order to meet a $250,000 annual allocation to the world. And out of that came the Equality Fund, which is on its way to being $1 billion fund that's going to support movements in perpetuity. That is the goal. And so when you have that kind of story, you attract a certain kind of character. And so, and you reinforce a certain kind of DNA. And actually my obsession as the CEO of this beautiful organization is to continue to create those creativity loops and those reinvention cycles constantly. Because we live in this volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world where the only thing that we know is going to be consistent is change. Mm-hmm. And so our capacity to adapt to that change is what's going to help us continue to like overachieve and deliver and meet the need. But I have to say, your question is a funny one. I'll tell you a very quick story about our recent staff. We're a global team, but we meet once a year in person, and it's just a total highlight. And my very smart colleagues were like, we need to have an entire retreat based solely on play. And I was like, what now? Even me, I was at my limits of imagination on that. I was like, but what about the business? Like, what about, we got stuff to do.
Yeah.
And my colleague, my colleagues, Carrie Jo and Ellery, and they were like, just trust us on this one. And I was like, okay, more play. And you know what? It was a very powerful experience, actually. The trust amongst the team that was accelerated was visible, profound. And there was this one game that we started to play, which taught me a lot. And the game was, one person had to leave the room and they had to close their eyes. And then they had to come back into the room. And there was an assignment that that person had to complete. And the whole staff team, all they could say was yes.
Whoa.
And so my, one of my brave colleagues came in, and it was a hilarious experience. And she finally got to the solution, which was she needed to put a chair on a table. And then I had this moment. I was like, well, I'm the leader of this joint, so I feel like I should probably put my hand up and I should probably volunteer to do this. And I went out the room, and they decided on something for me to figure out. And I walked back in the room, and my heart was racing because I was like, I don't want to let this team down. What if I don't interpret their actions? And there was like all the psychology around like getting to an answer, and I was really nervous, like nervous, sweating, nervous. And I swear to you, Chris, like this team got me to my task, which was to draw a smiley face on a whiteboard in like 30 seconds.
Wow.
It was extraordinary. And then my colleague came up and she did it. And she's our innovation person. And she went outside the room and she came back in. And her assignment was to type a message on the Zoom screen to the virtual participants. So not without complexity. And everybody was like moving her forward in one direction, except for our CFO. And our CFO was giving her different information. Our CFO was saying something else to her. And so because this person is this person, she started to recognize what my CFO was saying as a weak signal. Ooh. So she was like incorporating that as a weak signal, not as not being aligned with the rest of the team. And when we debriefed after, my CFO, Oge, was like, this is the way that I saw it. And my colleague Sue was like, yes, and that's your perspective because of the way in which you orient. And so I needed to hear that. And it actually helped me get more clarity to where I was going. And so it really helped us to understand ways in which we work together and how we see the world and how we need to listen to each other and the importance of weak signals. And all of this was, all enwrapped in play. And there was a ton of laughter and a ton of like letting go and a ton of just being playful and childish and fun. And that in and of itself is also freeing.
That is so fantastic. My firm, I'm Impactful, my consulting practice, we do a lot of play consulting. And I did a webinar yesterday about boards. And it was all about centering joy, play, and love with your board. And just remembering all any of this is a group of people, right?
Yes.
And especially think about a board, right? Coming together around an issue, a cause. And I said to them at the beginning of the webinar, you guys, this is all going to be about feelings and emotions and relationships, because that is all of it. Mm-hmm. And if you think, oh no, turn that around. Oh yes, because we can certainly do something about that, right?
Yes.
This idea that my board is very disengaged. Like, okay, well, they might just feeling disconnected. What do? We just we invest in the relationships, invest in the emotion. How does it feel?
Yes.
Right? How are you feeling? So to let you all get to feel, for you to feel so nervous, right?
Yeah,
so
totally.
It's powerful as the leader, and for your those that work with and for you to see you nervous is a human moment.
100%. 100%. No, it was honestly, it was just incredibly
fantastic.
Valuable. It was incredibly valuable. And what I would say now, what I often say to the team is this focus on relationships that you're talking about is so critical. And actually, it's the only thing we really need to get right now. One of the experiments that I've taken on personally as a personal learning experience this summer is to put myself in places that I otherwise would never be. And in order to learn the competencies that are required to build bridges and to hold conversations and to imagine possibilities and partnerships with folks who don't traditionally work in the human rights or gender equality or philanthropy space. And those have been really, really uncomfortable situations for me. But I'm persevering, because I'm learning a lot about myself. And I really believe that I want to master relationship building as a tool and a strategy to help us bust the silos that we all find ourselves in right now. Because the only thing that's going to get us through to a lighter side of this is people-powered connection and movement. And if we can do that across our spheres, whether that's racial justice or gender equality, or whether that's public sector or private sector, or whether that's, media and literature, whatever that is, we need to find ways to build more connective tissue across all of these spheres of work and these types of people in order for us to build more power.
Can you give an example of an uncomfortable place you put yourself?
I can. I found myself in a conversation with a number of people who work in the climate space. And the Equality Fund does a lot of work in the climate space, specifically focusing on investing in leaders who are driving climate resilience and climate adaptation, in particular Indigenous rights organizations throughout the world. And we have a really significant climate lens, obviously, in our investment strategy. However, I found that I was in a group of people who were really devoted climate people and very technical people, and looking for technical solutions and looking for business-driven solutions. And I kept trying to speak about this new world order that we find ourselves in, and the ways in which we have the opportunity to actually build back better and build so much more smartly, incorporating all the human knowledge that we have built. And I would say it was like a lead balloon.
I'm like nodding. I'm like, oh yeah. They were not doing that.
I was like, and crickets. It was just crickets. And I was like, oh, because this normally works. What is happening? My pitch normally works. And it really didn't. And I think it was a cultural thing, because I wasn't obviously in a North American environment. It was a sector thing, because they were largely like very technical folks. It was I'm a more of a emotive person, and that was not the vibe in the room. There was a lot of women in the room, but it was women who were used to being the only women, and so they had a very different orientation and experience versus me, who I feel like only ever works with women. So there were a lot of things at play, and it's not like I was walking into Barclays Bank and pitching the CFO or whatever, right? It wasn't actually you that
generally aligned on what you hoped would come to pass.
I was trying to make the world a better place.
Yes, right.
However, it really, I was like, here I am waxing poetic about the relationships and how we need to build better relationships and broker and become masters at relationships. And I walk into this semi-adjacent environment and feel like a total fish out of water. So it was a really interesting, humbling experience, but it is a skill that you have to work on.
That's a great story. Thank you for sharing it. It's making me think about, play as a bridge building tool, right? Joy, play, and fun, touching our humanity. But, one person's idea of what's fun and playful and another. So I'm also kind of making me think about where rooms I go into, maybe let someone else choose the game.
Yes.
Even that kind of mindset, or even specifically, versus thinking, I know how to, and we each know if we've, like you have had the benefit of working all over the world, and still have, you're seeing it all through your lens, as any of us is.
Of course.
Just continuing. I've had a couple guests talk about the power of the third thing. So like, if we get out of the mindset that things are, binary, right? Maybe in the middle. So the idea would be, someone might be, progressive, someone might be conservative. We'll just use those terms.
Yes.
But maybe they both love bulldogs, French bulldogs, or maybe they both love sailing or something like that. Or maybe they both, shared a similar passion for a song or a book or a movie or a hobby, right?
Yeah.
Like, spending time cultivating that and nurturing and finding it. I got to quote you. I saw something you said about tired of being patient. Does that still resonate?
Yes.
Yeah.
I really feel I'm calm, but I feel an absolute sense of urgency, because I mean, given the state of the world that we find ourselves in, given the the complete funding cliff that we are, whether it's because of USAID or other governments following suit, or the state of philanthropy, like the entire, social impact sector is just on a cliff.
Yeah.
And so I definitely feel that sense of urgency, right, I would say. And I'm hungry for like the boldness that the moment requires.
And, back to that mention we had about kind of like the buckets of dollars, right? And the difference between billion and trillion, I think we sometimes kind of forget.
Mm-hmm.
70 billion, like it is, you said unfathomable, right?
Yeah.
But we're not gonna, we're just not, and maybe something good from all this is that we're clearly not going to be able to solve this with the old ways.
Absolutely.
Right. And so, call again, like we talked about, call out the imagination. Who's got the next, the next craziest idea, right? Let's explore that. Right. And I love that you're proving. Do you find when you talk about the facts about how these businesses perform and how these indexes perform, you're speaking factually, pointing to a chart, holding it up. Yeah. Do you feel like you're still hitting a bit of a glazed eye or cotton in the ears and people aren't really hearing you? Or is that getting better?
I mean, like, girlfriend, you got to know your audience. It depends, sort of, right? Yeah. But actually, somebody who I really respect, because we sometimes feel like we're playing dress up, right? We walk into these big investment spaces, and here we are in our power suits, and we're really here to talk about numbers because we think that that's what we should do, and we share our deeply compelling early results, and we show all the slides and all the PowerPoints and all the legitimacy. Mm-hmm. We think that this is how you're legitimate. And somebody who's incredibly experienced in the investment space took me aside this summer, and he said, just tell the stories, Jess.
Yeah.
And actually I was like, oh, that I can do. Yeah. Here I am trying to be
kind of play their game,
play
right?
their game their way.
Yeah.
And actually, wouldn't it be nice if we were able to actually feel something here? Yeah. And isn't that actually what makes change happen? So it was a good reminder to stick with the skills that we have really mastered in our sector. Yeah. And to help bring those to help soften the edges of what's happening in the investment sphere so that we can truly blur the lines,
Yeah. I used to, back in the day, do fundraising, nonprofit fundraising. And one of my favorite little turns of phrase was 3 facts and 1 story. To have the board members, the ambassadors for the organization walking around 3 tight facts and 1 great story to illustrate it. And just have that kind of memorized, right? And, they can, the 3 facts can change and the story can change, but that's just like a tight little, where you get the quantitative and the qualitative, all in one.
I love that. I'm writing that down.
Yeah, have at it. Okay, so let's talk a little call to action as we wrap up. What would you say to the investors and philanthropists that are listening? Maybe, maybe they're on the sidelines, but maybe they were, the 15 benches up and now they're down on the first row. They're getting closer to the field, if that metaphor holds up. What could you say to welcome them onto the field and be part of this with you?
What a question. I would say in the history of time, the only thing that's ever truly brought about change is people-powered movements. And people-powered movements are marathons, not sprints. They are like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. They are breaking ground and holding ground in equal measure. And they are lifetimes and decades. Like, you just have to look at the civil rights movement. It's not like where we want to be in the racial justice, fight, but the fight continues. And I use that as an example because we're talking hundreds of years. And actually, the piece that I have made in my own life and in my own career is that the progress that I am trying to gain and the achievements that I am trying to drive may not actually be realized in my lifetime. I really want us to get comfortable with that, right? Because change, sometimes it's quick and it can be accelerated and you can make a big, meaningful change really fast. But when we're talking about, and I said it earlier, like cultures, behaviors, patterns, norms, attitudes, belief systems, laws, attitudes, like all of these types of things, these are generational changes.
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to do with the Equality Fund is build something that will stand the test of time, that will accompany those generations of changes so they really, really stick. And I would love for us to be having, like, how do we endow this work? How do we ensure that we are fueling those leaders over time, over decades, over the setbacks, over the 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, over the marathon, not the sprint, so that in 100 years, when my daughter Sophia is looking at her grandchildren, we are truly actually looking at an entirely different system.
Yeah. And I had a friend share the other day adding sprint, marathon, relay race. Right.
Yes. Love that.
Pass the baton, and you're in the midst of that. You've got your leaders are doing that, the ones that you're funding and fueling. The Equality Fund is holding the baton at this time, right? Yeah. You're under your leadership, and that will continue. I love it. I'm super excited to send people to the show notes to find the links to click and support what you're doing. Now we're going to be fast friends. I will meet you in person for ice cream sometime, and we can continue this. I had more bites than you. That's pretty typical. I also ask them to get their ice cream, then I ask you a question. So it's like, it's a little tricky. So enjoy. Thank you so much for being here with us today and for the work you're doing all over the world. It's so inspiring. And you really are bringing fun to the serious work of changing the world, which I think is what's going to make it work.
Well, I'm so grateful for you. Thank you for taking this time with me. And thank you for your amazing questions, actually. And thank you for bringing a little levity to the work, which is so serious. Actually, that too is quite liberating. And so I'm really grateful for that. And my children wish to also thank you for this expensive ice cream. So.
Tell them they can have at it. All right. Thanks again, Jess.
Thanks
See
so
y'all.
much.
Thanks for being part of the Playful family.
Bye.
Bye. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for listening to the Playful Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review it on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you know of a leader or organization that's doing good in the world and you'd love to help us help them amplify their message, I would love to have them on the show. Go to the show notes and click there, or go to impactfulinc.com/contact. And that's impactful with 2 L's, inc.com/contact. And let us know who you're thinking about. Can't wait to see you next time.